Greetings viewer, you join me aboard what has to be one of the best electric cars currently on the market, the Peugeot e-208. It's not perfect, but it has so many qualities that it really can be recommended as one of the best. It looks great on the outside, the interior is remarkably special for a small Peugeot, it has a big battery pack, decent range, and it's remarkably fun to drive. I must admit that I really do turn my head whenever I see a new 208 drive by me. I think it's desperately pretty from the outside. And even though some of its competitors have also improved their latest subcompact or super mini, I think the one from Peugeot is the prettiest by far. Compared to the previous 208, this latest one looks far less feminine. I wouldn't call it masculine per se, but you really do notice the difference in style. This new one is quite aggressive. It has a very frowny looking face, and it's really rather pert. The front and rear fascias are dominated by the light clusters. They have a similar design, both in the front and in the rear, with the 3 streaks of LEDs. On higher spec models, the outermost streak extends all the way down the bumper and it's still illuminated, giving the 208 a really imposing face. I don't think there is another small car in its class that matches the impression this car gives you when you see it. You really won't forget it easily. And it's pretty good from the rear too. The rear glass is quite slanted, so it looks a bit like a fastback. And it looks nowhere near as bubbly as the previous generation 208. This being the all-electric e-208, Peugeot has attempted to differentiate it from gas-burning examples, although the differentiation is quite subtle. The front and rear badges have some light blue highlights. There are E logos located on the C-pillars, also finished in the same shade of light blue. This car comes with the unique 17-inch wheels, because it's also the GT model, which isn't really a separate model, it's just a higher trim. It's the highest trim actually. The charge port is located where you would expect to find the fuel filler, because this is a car designed to also run on gasoline. And if you think the exterior is striking, wait till you see the interior. I will begin the interior commentary by saying that I don't like Peugeot's idea of putting the dials higher and making the steering wheel smaller, so that in order to see the dials, the driver has to peer over the top of the wheel. Because for me, this means setting the steering wheel a bit too low for my liking. Thankfully, you can get relatively low in the car, so the driving position does help you accept this higher dial, lower steering wheel situation. But to be honest, this is my only gripe with the interior. Oh, and the fact that I don't really fit in the back. I am 183 centimeters tall, or almost 6 foot tall, and I don't really fit behind myself. I don't have the knee room. I just barely fit for headroom, but when it comes to my knees, I kind of have to spread my legs a bit too far for comfort. Thankfully, front seat passengers are really pampered, at least in this top of the range model. It comes with these lovely optional sport seats that are part leather, and they have an Alcantara insert on the middle part here, which is gray, and it looks really nice actually. They are remarkably comfortable and supportive at the same time. And they also look great. Did I say they look great? This example also has a black headliner, which I'm a big fan of. It really makes an interior feel sporty and makes you feel more cocooned inside. The very small and oddly shaped steering wheel is remarkably good to hold on to. And it makes the car feel extra sporty. And on this top-of-the-line GT model, the parts that you grip are clad in perforated leather, giving it a premium feel. This is a really nice steering wheel, even if it's like a squared-off oblong thing. But it does the job. The most recent small car that I drove, which also happened to be electric, is the Honda E, that has a very Unusual yet minimalist interior that has a few quirky touches, but it's a great place to travel in, and I really enjoyed that. And even though the Honda doesn't really have high quality plastics anywhere, the interior somehow felt like it belonged in a more expensive car. The Peugeot e-208 takes it one step further. The top of the dash is covered in very pleasant and high quality feeling soft touch plastic, and the rest of the cabin is remarkably well screwed together. Gaps are minimal, everything seems very well aligned, and very solid. There's nothing even remotely flimsy about it. I tried pulling on bits of trim, on door handles, on door pockets, and I have to say I am hugely impressed. Very good job on the build quality of this car. And even though I've only said good things about the interior, I haven't even begun talking about the dashboard design, which I think is also brilliant and very fitting for this car. It matches the exterior character, the flamboyant, avant-garde, techie, futuristic vibe that you get from the exterior is thankfully confirmed inside the car. This has to be one of the more sculptural looking dashboards that I've seen in any car. And I also really like the way these floating toggle switches work. The front ones are actually switches, and behind them you have touch sensitive shortcuts that take you to various menus within the infotainment. And they work fine, the shortcuts themselves, although I did have some problems with the seat heating, which is kind of awkwardly placed, and you don't get a confirmation whenever you enable it. The LEDs that turn on whenever you enable the seat heater are obscured by the wiper stalk. And since you don't get any feedback or confirmation on the screen that you've enabled the seat heating, I'm going to try it again, maybe I didn't see it. No, it doesn't come on anywhere. So you have to move your head to the side and check if they're on. I must also sing the digital gauge cluster's praises. It's not your typical gauge cluster. The screen itself is normal. You've seen similar screens in other cars, although it's a good screen because you don't see the pixels and there's no weird motion blur thing going on. It's all very crisp and easy to read. But Peugeot also offers an optional setup that actually projects information onto an additional transparent screen in front of the actual screen, and information is projected onto it, just like in the case of a head-up display. It's exactly like that, actually. And what this achieves is a very nice hologram 3D effect kind of thing. If you move your head from side to side, you will notice that the speed reading and some of the error messages that you get, like the one when you don't secure the car with the parking brake when you open the door and want to get out, that is the most annoying sound ever put in any car. So you'll probably do what I did and just concede and just enable the parking brake whenever you leave the car, even though you've put it in park and it's not going to roll anywhere. The e-208 is better than most rivals when it comes to battery capacity. It draws juice from a 50 kilowatt-hour pack, whose usable capacity is 45 kilowatt-hours, and Peugeot says that it should take you 340 kilometers on the WLTP test cycle. When I picked the car up from Peugeot, it was almost fully charged, and it showed me 232 kilometers of range. So that's like a 100 kilometer discrepancy. And even though the WLTP test cycle is more accurate than the NEDC test cycle that was used before it, it still doesn't really provide the actual range that you should expect to achieve in the real world. To that end, the EPA test cycle they use in the United States is far more accurate, and sometimes it's quite pessimistic. You can even surpass that. So I would say that 230 kilometers is a bit low. You can probably get somewhere close to 250, maybe 260. So let's say around 250 kilometers. And the only car that surpasses it, both in claimed and real world range, is the Renault Zoe. However, the Zoe is nowhere near as enjoyable as this. This Peugeot is fun to drive, it's nippy, it's very premium feeling, and you get none of that in the Zoe, although it does have a bit more range. So if all-out range is what you want to get out of your small electric city car, then the Zoe is your best choice. But as a car, I think the e-208 is considerably better. Another area where the e-208 is better than I think all its rivals from the research that I did is its charging capacity. While most cars top out at around 50 kilowatts, this actually goes all the way up to 100 kilowatts. And even though I didn't find the charger quick enough to test it, that's really impressive. Peugeot says that you should be able to charge 80% of the battery in 27 minutes. And from the 50 kilowatt charger that I used, I gained like 45% charge back in the battery in 25 minutes. So I think that's pretty good. And unlike the previous small electric city car that I drove, the Honda E, the range doesn't seem to go down quite as quickly, even though I did drive it on faster roads on the city's ring road actually, which is where I am now in really congested traffic, but I know a shortcut. It's worth noting that the 1.2 liter gasoline burning 208 is actually lighter than a ton. It's 980 something kilos, but the e-208 is considerably heavier. It's 1.5 tons. That's a huge difference. That's a 500 kilo difference. I don't think I've seen another car that has both gasoline and electric versions that has quite as big a discrepancy when it comes to the weight of the gas burning and the electric models. And in order to make the car cope with this extra weight, Peugeot has given it different suspension. It has extra bracing for the rear suspension, which is a torsion beam setup, and the extra bracing is there to keep it from moving from side to side. I have not driven other versions of the 208, so I cannot compare, but to me this suspension is pretty comfortable. The car is generally quite supple, even though it rides on relatively large for its size 17-inch rims. And with the relatively low and sporty driving position, the small steering wheel, the sporty seats, and the decent response from the motor, which we'll get to in a second, you really feel like you can throw this car into bends. It does lean a bit, and because the battery pack isn't in the floor as it is in most EVs, it's actually beneath the rear bench seat and somewhat into the trunk area, which, by the way, I would like to point out that the electric version has the same 265 liters of cargo volume in the back that the normal car has, even though the battery lives somewhere back there. But it doesn't intrude on space, which is nice. So probably because the battery isn't especially low in the car, although it's not high per se, maybe it does roll a bit more than the Honda E, which didn't have especially stiff suspension. But it still doesn't roll much, and even with the 1.5 ton curb weight, the car still generally grips and doesn't want to understeer. I'm pretty sure that the gas burning version that is far lighter is far better to drive, but this isn't bad. As you probably know, weight is the biggest enemy of handling and braking performance. So if this very heavy version of the 208 is this good, I'm really curious to see what other versions that don't have a huge battery are like to drive. But until Peugeot decides to make a GTI version of this car, the e-208 is currently the quickest version of 208 that you can buy. It sprints to 100 kilometers per hour in 8.3 seconds, although it feels quicker, and some independent reviewers have tested it and it actually dips below the 8-second mark. And it's really punchy. If you put it in sport mode in order to access all of the power, because if you put it in normal and then eco, you lose like 30 horsepower every time. So when you put it in eco mode, you only use like half the power it has to offer. You really do feel a difference in power and punchiness between the modes. It's almost dead in eco mode. Regarding its electricity consumption, during my drive, it was 16.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And, as usual, I did not drive it particularly economically. This car gets a full array of active and passive safety features. There's all the usual airbags, although there isn't one between the seats, like there was in the Honda E or the Honda Jazz. But you do get active safety brake, recommended speed display, driver's attention warning, blind spot sensors, and traffic sign recognition. And this car also has the optional adaptive cruise control, which is really good. This is a great effort by Peugeot. They really have to be complimented, not only for making the e-208 as good as it is, but making the regular 208 as good as it is, even though I have not driven the regular 208. It's probably really good. The reviews are generally positive, so I can understand why. But if you're looking for a small city EV, you're not really going to go wrong with this car. It has the looks, it has the tech, it has the comfort, it has the big battery that provides lots of range. You can charge it really quickly at up to 100 kilowatts. I really like this car, and I was happy to be given a chance to drive it. And it's a sign of great things to come from Peugeot, I hope. Thanks for watching.